Howdy y'all, I'm Mickey and I'm back in my house for now because the school year is over and it's summer break. I have officially finished my first year of college and I wanted to talk now, after the year is over and after I've experienced 2 semesters at this school, what my experience is as a trans person, as a non-binary person in college have been. Obviously, a lot of this is going to be influenced by what school I go to, because different schools are very different from each other. My experiences at UCF are probably very, very different than someone's experiences might be at, say, BYU, for example. And that's where I'm coming from talking about my experiences in college. I kind of sectioned my notes according to certain subjects and certain things that come with being trans and concerns one might have about gender and certain things. The first being dorms. All dorm buildings at UCF are co-ed. They contain any mixes of genders. For the freshman dorms, specifically, that's where I stayed, and for a lot of the dorms that you share rooms with people, they aren't private rooms, your roommate is going to be assigned based off of your sex assigned at birth, generally. Before they assign roommates, though, they give you a list of like 6 questions that you have to answer yes or no, and one of those is if your gender identity differs from the gender or sex that you have put on your application and the one you were assigned at birth. Your legal sex, I think, is how it's worded. If you click no on that one, later they will send you a questionnaire type thing that helps them figure out what the best housing situation would be for you. It's basically just a form that asks what your biggest concerns with rooming are and what you think the best solution for yourself would be. I didn't fill the thing out because I was lazy, and I also didn't care that much about having a girl roommate, and so I don't really know what the process involving that is beyond I read the questionnaire briefly. The second section type thing I have is involving names. Over the summer, my UCF, which is the student portal type thing, updated, and instead of having to fill out the whole form, there's now just a space on student personal info that you can fill in your preferred first name and it will change your name in the systems right there at my UCF. You don't have to print anything out, you don't have to download anything, you just go in my UCF and change your name. You can only change your first name because they have to keep track of you somehow, but changing your first name is very easy in the system. When it first updated, I think the name thing only changed your name on rolls on the online system so that automated emails will address you by your preferred name. And I think it got to housing. It got on, when I opened the housing portal, it says Hi Mickey on it, so I'm assuming it is in housing in some way. In the past, there were things that name change slot would not change that it does now. And so if you were to go online like I did and check out the T guide, which is very helpful, if a little outdated, that will list out certain things that it used to change. It changes all of those on top of things like your ID. You can now get your student ID, the cards you have to carry around, to have your preferred name on it. It will put whatever your name in the system is on the card. That's a very new thing that they implemented only a couple months before the end of the year, I think. But now you can have an ID that says your name on it, and there's no long legal process you have to go through. You just type your name in that little bar, and then you go to the ID place and you get your ID, and then your ID has your name on it. When I went to orientation, guests would get guest tags, and students would have blank tags that had which group you were going to be in orientation, but they wouldn't have your name on them. And when you go up, the people would ask you, is the name on this the name you go by, and the name that you want me to write down? And that was my first impression of UCF, because I hadn't done a tour or anything there. My first impression was them making sure that you go by your legal name, because if you don't, they don't want you to be uncomfortable at orientation, and they want people to address you properly and by the right name. Apparently you can get your Knight's email to be under your preferred name, because you can't edit your name in the system. Somebody else has to do that. I have not looked into that yet, so I don't really know the process for how to do that, but apparently it's something you can do. The last little section I have on my notes is SJA, which is Social Justice and Advocacy, and the smaller branch under that, which is LGBTQ plus services. Those two organizations, I guess they'd count as two. They're kind of a big one, and then one of the smaller branches, the other being MSC. Those organizations are very active on campus, and they are working hard to make the UCF area, especially on campus, very accepting and it's a nice place to be, and you don't have to worry as much about being yourself. I remember when I moved in, and when you have to go to scan your ID to activate it in the community office, they had a bucket of these pronoun pins here, which were made by LGBTQ plus services, and they just have this bucket of pronoun pins on the front desk in this office, and it's the first thing you see. It's one of the first things you see when you're moving in as a freshman onto campus. LGBTQ plus services offers a lot of training modules and meetings that you can go to, a lot of talks, and staff members go to those a lot. And it's led to certain staff members and teachers signing their emails with their names and their pronouns, and normalizing the idea that not everyone might use the pronouns you would expect them to based off of their appearance and what you would assume. Outside of people who work at UCF, I know certain students at the beginning of the semester, when certain teachers ask you to introduce yourself to the class, which usually happens in smaller classes that are very based on talking to each other, kind of discussion courses, there are certain students that, unprompted in their introductions, will include their pronouns. And when I saw that happening in classes, a lot of people would just follow along. Someone would use their pronouns. They're generally sitting with friends if they have friends in the class, so it's one person introduces themselves with their pronouns, the next person does, and then people who don't know these people but have noticed this trend in introductions will continue to do so, and it just normalizes that process, just that being a part of introducing yourself to people. LGBTQ plus services puts on a lot of events throughout the year, which I already said, but outside of training and talks, they just put on events. Some of those events related to this specific topic included things for Trans Day of Remembrance and Trans Day of Visibility. I was out of town for the Trans Day of Visibility event, but my friend still got me a t-shirt from it. So this superhero shirt that says BU and has the T, and then on the back says that it's Trans Day of Visibility, was made on campus. It wasn't made on campus, but it was made by LGBTQ plus services and then distributed on campus for free for students who were involved in the TDUV event. CAPS, which is UCF's Counseling and Psychological Services, has group therapy for trans students where they talk about trans-related issues, I assume. I don't go to it, but I know it's a thing that's there and a resource for getting connected with other trans people on campus. If you don't want to go to therapy to try and get connected to other trans folks, Pride Commons in Farrell Commons is probably a good place to do that. It's just a fun little area to hang out and be yourself and meet other people. And I keep focusing on SJA and LGBTQ plus services, but those aren't the only people on campus working to open discussions about gender and sexuality. Student Health Services put on a panel that was about gender affirmative health care that was aimed towards doctors and nurses either on campus or students who were majoring in the medical field. And there was a lot of discussion about how gender may affect the healthcare being provided to people and how the medical system that we currently have often leaves trans people out of it and how that can mess things up. A lot of talk about unconscious biases, a lot of talk about how to make the medical field a safer place for trans and non-binary individuals. That was put on by health services. That wasn't solely LGBTQ plus services. Honestly, the environment on campus that I was around seemed to be people who were open and nice, and even if they didn't know certain things or it was new to them, they seemed very open to learning and trying and weren't just outright transphobic towards me. Especially people who live there, students and staff, people who are there a lot. UCF does get religious protesters though. There's the religion guy, which if you go to UCF, you know who the religion guy is because he sucks and everyone hates him. Sometimes he brings friends, sometimes there's other religious protester people. It's often just him screaming by himself. Sometimes there's others. They're more annoying than anything else. A lot of people make fun of them. It's fun to just harass them when you walk by because they don't go here. They're just there to be awful to students. Like, what kind of life do you have that you go and harass teenagers and young adults for fun? Just losers. Outside of those guys, though, the environment on campus is pretty great. There's gender-neutral restrooms strewn throughout campus. Maybe not as many as there should be, but there are gender-neutral bathrooms definitely in a greater ratio than there was at my high school, for example, and I'm lucky there were any at my high school. Overall, the biggest issue I had related to trans people was, surprisingly, my gender studies textbook, which is horrendous when it comes to trans people, by the way. Curriculum is gonna suck sometimes, and it was less aggressively hate-filled and more just the writer has obviously spoken to like one trans person ever in a short conversation and then just made stuff up as they went along. Overall, my experience being trans in college is that it was fine. It was great. People were respectful. They call me by my name. Most people use the right pronouns for me. The environment is open to trans people existing. It encourages people to live as their true selves. It has plenty of spaces where you can know that you're going to be safe and accepted and acknowledged as who you are. It's just really great. I'm really glad that my freshman year held such good experiences related to this, and I'm glad that I did end up at a college that is so accepting and good. Obviously, there's still work to go in school in the greater Orlando area and elsewhere, I hope that the work that people are putting into at school keeps up. I hope to get involved in it. And I hope my experiences for the next 3 years at school are just as good as these first year ones were. I hope the future brings all of those, all good things to me and you, but we won't know until we get there. For now, this is it. Ciao.